Sustainability is a concept which seems capable of being all things to all people. There are many definitions and a wide range of guidance from organisations and individuals. Such a range can be quite confusing for the homeowner who is seeking to do their bit to contribute towards sustainable development. The confusion can arise to the point where it actually becomes stressful, and it may act as a disincentive to the homeowner to do anything more than simple actions such as reducing the thermostat, taking the temperature down a couple of degrees, or changing the light bulbs so that they're more energy efficient. This webinar will look at the struggle faced by an individual homeowner in the context of a 110-year-old property in the northeast of Scotland in a rural location. The problems that they encountered and some of the solutions that they had applied to the problems of achieving sustainability within the context of their particular project. All clients face the dilemma of how to get the most out of their budget. Value for money has been a consistent feature throughout almost all projects, and is a particular concern where an individual is spending their own, usually hard-earned, money. Part of seeking to maximise value may, for those individuals who are reasonably capable of a spot of DIY, involve identifying the appropriate balance between paying a contractor to carry out work and doing the work themselves for free. There can be no doubt that a given budget can be stretched further by increasing the proportion of DIY work within a project, but this has to be done in the context of a realistic self-assessment of skill and ability, along with an awareness of any legal constraints, such as certification requirements, on carrying out particular kinds of work. This can be a particular constraint when considering the use of specific technologies that attract grant support. The requirements to use both specific hardware and installers or contractors is a common feature of the perhaps more desirable technologies such as ground source heat pumps and wood pellet stoves. Within the context of a limited budget, the more exotic technologies may be discounted by an individual solely because of a realization that the cost, even after allowing for any grant support, represents a disproportionate amount of the total budget and therefore reduces the range of opportunities available. It is possible that the majority of those seeking to upgrade to a more sustainable approach to the use of their home are not solely focused on adding the latest technology. There may also be a consideration of how to add more living space, along with other factors that contribute to the day-to-day quality of life in their home environment. Consequently, the decision as to what represents sustainability almost certainly varies between individual homeowners. Ultimately, any steps, regardless of how small they may seem, taken towards increasing sustainability with regard to the use of the built environment have to be recognised and applauded if we are going to achieve the objective of looking after our planet. When the perspective of the homeowner is considered, the project can appear to be much more daunting than it does to an experienced contractor. The majority of clients in this sector of the construction industry are generally regarded as naive. They do not have sufficient understanding of the construction process or the various possible routes to procuring construction work to fully appreciate what they are actually undertaking. Consequently, they will either overestimate or underestimate the scope of the project. They may not even have a fully formed concept of the end product, which may simply be the desire to become more sustainable with regard to their home environment. There are of course some clients who have considerable understanding of the construction process, procurement possibilities and the range of sustainable technologies available. However, such clients are a minority. Naive clients can be regarded as being potentially vulnerable in that there are many questions to be answered as part of procuring their desired product, and they will inevitably seek answers from more experienced individuals. For many of these potential clients, the internet is increasingly the first information resource that they turn to, and there is a huge amount of information available from this source. Unfortunately, the naive client will, at least initially, find it difficult to evaluate the quality of the information identified, and mistakes will be made with regard to selecting materials, technologies, suppliers and contractors. Straw bales, for example, are generally seen as being a sustainable building material, but would a naive client have sufficient expertise to realise when false information about the use of this material is presented? Here we have an example of a deliberate attempt to deceive. This may seem quite shocking initially, but the author of this site will, if contacted, be quite open that this was the intention, and also inform you that the reason for this was that he wanted to see how unquestioning individuals would be of material that appears on the internet. Building a lighthouse from straw bales? How many people would immediately decide that such a proposal is a ridiculous one? How long did it take you to decide that this could not possibly be true? When seeking to determine the scope of the project unfolding in front of them, the client will be faced with a range of questions. The answers to these will ultimately lead the client to certain potential contractors, from which the client will have to select the best. The less clear the answers to the questions are, the greater the probability that the client will contact the wrong contractors. This proposition does have a basis in the assumption that there are many contractors to choose from. However, in a country such as Scotland, with large rural areas having relatively low population densities, the situation may actually be one where there is, from the perspective of integrating sustainable technologies into the project, a shortfall in the number of contractors available. Depending upon the extent and nature of sustainable technologies and materials that the client would like to include in the project, there may in fact be no best contractors readily available. A typical question encountered in rural locations would be, does the project involve a change of use? The conversion of disused and surplus farm buildings, such as steadings, has been quite a popular route to securing a more rural lifestyle for a number of years. However, is it also a more sustainable lifestyle? These buildings were never intended for human habitation. Cows may well enjoy a centrally heated steading, but how many farmers would be of the opinion that the investment would be a good one? A change of use from sheltering animals to providing a habitat for humans raises a number of other questions, some of which may have already been addressed if the building comes with detailed planning consent. However, a proportion of this kind of building are marketed with outline consent only, and some are marketed with no consent at all. They are simply believed to be suitable for conversion. With many rural buildings, there may be an attendant requirement to conserve aspects of the structure, and from a cultural perspective, this is perfectly reasonable. However, it can require the client to find contractors having specialist skills and further reduce the resource pool that the client has to work from. If nothing else, this can impact on cost. Competitive tendering only works if there is a level of competition. In the absence of competition, the client becomes vulnerable once more, in that the contractor becomes increasingly able to determine the conditions of engagement. There are SME contractors in northeast Scotland who will undertake quite large projects solely on the basis of an estimated price, no formal contract, and a vague indication of how long it will take them to complete the project. Asking them to also incorporate novel technologies into the project is unlikely to elicit an enthusiastic response. A final point to clarify in this introduction is that this study is not concerned with the issue of fuel poverty. It is acknowledged that this issue represents an increasing problem and is particularly problematic in rural areas, given that there may only be a single energy source available, usually oil. But for this particular client, fuel poverty was not a motivating issue. There was a desire to reduce energy consumption and also an initial desire to move away from oil as the primary heating fuel. However, the difficulty of comparing fuels and energy sources on the basis of CO2 emissions caused the client to decide that a key objective would be simply to reduce the amount of heating oil used on the basis that this would result in a reduced level of CO2 production.